Welcome to The Explainer. Man, I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we are jumping right into a deep dive on some truly transformative concepts surrounding modern leadership. We're pulling these straight from the brilliant insights of Simon Sinek, and we're going to trace a really fascinating journey together today. We'll start by looking inward, at our personal mindsets, and then we're going to expand that outward. We'll explore how those individual mindsets fundamentally shape how we treat each other, how we build our teams, and ultimately how we create a thriving workplace culture. So, if you've ever wondered what separates a standard, run-of-the-mill manager from a truly unforgettable leader, well, the concepts we're unpacking today are going to map that out for you perfectly. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap. We're going to cover the infinite mindset, true leadership, humility and accountability, digital empathy, and finally, the right to love work. All these pieces are going to build into one incredibly powerful philosophy. Let's get to it. Section 1. The infinite mindset. Seeing the unseen. To kick things off, we really need to understand that there are fundamentally two different ways people view their daily grind. To paint a picture of this, let me share a bit of a mystery with you. Picture two lumberjacks, right? Every single morning, they start chopping wood at the exact same time. Every evening, they stop at the exact same time. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. Every single day, one of the lumberjacks just completely disappears for about an hour right in the middle of the day. And yet, day after day, the guy who takes that hour-long break ends up chopping way more wood than the guy who's just working nonstop. Eventually, the exhausted, nonstop lumberjack just throws his hands up and asks, "I don't get it. Where do you go for that hour?" The other lumberjack just smiles and says, "Oh, I go home to sharpen my axe." This just beautifully captures what Sinek calls the infinite mindset. It is not about how much you can blindly output in a single day. Actually, scratch that. It's really about long-term career pacing. It means stepping away, disconnecting, and taking those absolutely necessary breaks, like, literally turning off your email when you're on vacation, so you can come back sharper and way more effective. Now, this mindset totally applies to how we perceive opportunities, too. Sinek tells this great story about finishing a run in Central Park with a buddy. So, at the end of the race, a sponsor was giving away free bagels. But there was an issue. On one side of this picnic table, you had the boxes of bagels. But on the other side was this massive, winding line of runners just standing there waiting. Sinek looks over and says, "Hey, let's get a bagel." His friend takes one look at the massive crowd and goes, "The line's too long, I don't want to wait." Sinek just kept repeating, "Free bagel?" But his friends literally wouldn't budge. You see, his friend could only see the line, the obstacle. But Sinek, he could only see the bagels. So Sinek simply walked right up, leaned between two people in the line, reached into the box, and grabbed two bagels. Boom. The lesson? You don't always have to wait in line just because everyone else is. Now, before you start thinking that sounds a little selfish, consider this absolutely critical rule of ambition. Sinek says you can go after whatever you want, you just cannot deny anyone else to go after whatever they want. It is completely fine to break the conventional rules. Go ahead, skip the line, do things your own way. But, and this is a massive but, provided you do not impede someone else's journey to get what they want. It's all about charting your own unique path without becoming a roadblock for the people around you. Section 2. The core of true leadership. Taking care of each other. So, once you've got your own ambition in check, how do you handle the people to your left and your right? Well, when we look at the United States Navy SEALs, arguably the most elite warriors on the planet, it's incredibly revealing to look at who actually fails their selection process. Now, what's really interesting here is that it's a completely surprising list. The guys with the huge, bulging muscles covered in tattoos trying to prove how tough they are, they fail. The leaders who love to delegate everything but never ever get their own hands dirty, they fail. The star college athletes who have never truly been tested to the core of their being, yep, they don't make it either. Literally all of our stereotypical tough guys wash out. So who does make it? Well, sometimes they're skinny and scrawny, sometimes they're visibly shivering out of pure fear. But the defining trait, the absolute core trait of the candidates who actually make it, is that when they are physically and emotionally completely spent, when they have absolutely nothing left in the tank, they somehow find the energy to dig deep and help the person next to them. The punchline here is just profound. Elite status in a dangerous world isn't about your personal, individual toughness. It is entirely about your capacity to accept help when you're weak and to offer help when someone else is. And that brings us to Nelson Mandela, who is universally regarded as just a phenomenal leader. He actually learned his leadership style from watching his father, who was a tribal chief. His father's strategy was simple on paper, but incredibly difficult to execute in real life. First, you sit in a circle. Second, you are the very last to speak. And third, you only ask questions to understand others' opinions first. Think about that.
So many modern managers just barge into a room and say, okay, here's the problem, here's what I think we should do, now what do you guys think? According to Mandela's method, if you do that, it is already way too late. True leadership requires holding your own opinions back, not even nodding yes or no, until every single other person feels heard and has contributed. Moving on to Section 3, humility and accountability. You might be the problem.
We've talked a lot about listening and helping, but what happens when things go disastrously wrong? I want you to consider this shocking number: 70%. Let that sink in for a second. In the 18th century, there was a terrifying illness known as purple fever. They also called it the Black Death of childbed, and it absolutely ravaged Europe. In some hospitals, the peak mortality rate of women who contracted this right after giving birth hit an astonishing 70%.
To understand why this was happening, just look at the timeline. You had these brilliant men of science studying the corpses of these poor women in the morning, trying to find a cure, and then going straight to deliver babies in the afternoon. It wasn't until the mid-1800s that Dr. Oliver Wendell Holmes noticed the blindingly obvious. These doctors were conducting autopsies and then delivering babies without washing their hands. He stood up and told them, guys, you are the problem. But because they lacked humility, they completely ignored him. They called him crazy. Well, for 30 years, they called him crazy. It literally took 3 decades for them to finally swallow their pride, wash their hands, sterilize their instruments, and guess what? The disease just disappeared. The lesson here is absolutely vital. Sometimes, as a leader, you are the problem. You can absolutely take credit for your successes, but only if you take absolute accountability for your failures. Now, keeping that level of humility isn't easy, especially as you rise up in the ranks. Take the story of a former Undersecretary of Defense who was speaking at a massive conference. The year prior, when he still held his prestigious title, they flew in business class, a private driver was waiting for him at the airport, and when he got there, he was handed coffee in a beautiful ceramic cup. But this year, he was no longer the undersecretary, just a regular citizen. So he flew coach, he had to hail his own taxi, he found his own way backstage, and he had to pour his own coffee from a drip machine into a flimsy styrofoam cup. So the crucial point is this: you can enjoy the perks, but always, always remember, the ceramic cup is for the position. You only ever deserve a styrofoam cup. As you gain fame or fortune or seniority in your career, people are going to treat you better. They'll hold doors for you, they'll give you free stuff. Accept it, be grateful for it, but never, ever let yourself believe that it's for you. It's for the level of success you've achieved. You, the person beneath all the titles, always just deserve the styrofoam cup. Section 4, Empathy in the Digital Age, Changing the Environment. Let's pivot and look at the modern workplace, specifically those constant complaints we hear about younger generations being difficult. I really want you to stop and think about this question. If an entire generation is struggling in the workplace, is it their faults, or is it the environment we've created? It's a classic bait and switch, really. We ask young people to succeed, to build confidence, and to forge real relationships, but then we drop them into terrible corporate environments and blame them when they struggle. Practicing true empathy means shifting our mindset. We have to stop asking, how do I wring the most out of my people like a wet towel, and start asking, how do I help them be at their natural best? To really empathize with today's youth, you have to understand the underlying biology of their environment. Think about dopamine. It's a highly addictive, numbing chemical, and it gets released in our brains every single time we get a text or when we count the likes on our latest Instagram post. It is the exact same chemical that makes us feel good when we smoke, when we drink, or when we gamble. We have essentially handed an entire generation unfettered, 24/7 access to an addictive, numbing chemical right as they are going through the intensely high stress of adolescence. And this brilliantly illustrates the tragic real-world consequences of that biological reality. Because they've grown up in this filtered reality where everyone online pretends to have their life perfectly figured out, we see massively lower self-esteem. We see superficial friendships because they just haven't practiced building deep, messy reliance on others. And worst of all, when significant real-world stress hits, they often don't have the coping mechanisms to turn to a real human being for help. Instead, they turn to a device for temporary relief. As leaders, we absolutely must understand this context. It's not about them being weak. It's about them navigating an incredibly difficult environment that older generations literally never had to face.
All right, Section 5, the right to love work, cultivating passion.
We've talked a lot about the challenges, but what is the ultimate endgame of empathetic leadership?
Simply put, loving your work is a right and not a privilege. Honestly, it's complete madness that in our society, if someone says they love their job, we treat them like they just won the lottery. We're like, oh my God, no way, you're so lucky. That shouldn't be luck. Loving your job should be the absolute standard expectation. It's a fundamental right that we should all demand from our workplaces.
So how do we actually guarantee that, right? Well, that falls squarely on the leaders. Leaders must provide safe environments. I'm talking about environments where teams can actually express their vulnerabilities without fear of being fired, where they can accept correction without getting all defensive, because they know, deep down, the feedback is just meant to help them grow. When leaders show they genuinely care about their team's joy and skill set more than some short-term metric or external constituency, magic happens. The team will respond with absolute, unshakable loyalty. They will offer their blood, sweat, and tears to advance the company's vision, not just for the leader, but because the work becomes deeply personally meaningful to them.
Which brings us to this incredibly clear final contrast. On the left side, we have stress. That is simply working hard for something we do not care about. On the right side, we have passion. That is working hard for something we love. This right here is the entire difference between a poor leadership environment and an infinite mindset leadership environment. Both of them require hard work, but one completely drains you and the other fuels you.
I want to leave you with this final provocative thought today. I want you to think about your own life, your own career, and if you manage people, your own leadership style. Ask yourself, does your workplace demand your stress, or does it inspire your passion? The answer to that question is going to tell you exactly what kind of leader you're following or what kind of leader you are choosing to be. Thank you so much for walking through this incredible material with me today. And hey, I highly encourage you to keep striving for that styrofoam cup.